My termination letter said, "Performance inconsistent with company culture." Performance inconsistent with company culture. I had just closed the 3 largest contracts in company history, back to back, in 7 months. I had grown the client portfolio by 40%. I had built a team that was outperforming every other division. Performance inconsistent with company culture. I read that line 4 times. Then I put the letter down. I looked at my desk. At 7 years of files and relationships and work that had made other people's careers possible. And I thought, if my performance is the problem, let's see what happens to their culture. Without it. My name is Raina Cross. 35 years old. Business development. 7 years at a mid-sized government contracting firm called Nexus Solutions. I want to tell you what government contracting actually is, because it matters for what comes later. Government contracting is relationships. That is the whole business. Federal agencies need services. Private companies bid to provide those services. The companies that win are the ones with the relationships. The relationships with the procurement officers. The relationships with the agency decision makers. The relationships that are built over years of showing up and being reliable and understanding what the government actually needs rather than what looks good in a proposal. I had spent 7 years building those relationships. Not for myself. For Nexus. Every contract that came through my division had my fingerprints on the relationship underneath it. Every renewal. Every expansion. Every new agency that came to us came because someone who knew me made a call. I was not just an employee. I was the infrastructure. The CEO, a man named Victor Hale, understood this. Which is why what he did next was either the most arrogant decision in the company's history, or the most calculated. I still have not decided which. Victor had hired a new chief revenue officer 8 months before my termination. A man named Brett. Brett was polished. Well connected in the right social circles. The kind of confident that photographs well. He had a background in technology sales. Not government contracting. Not relationships built over years with procurement officers who have seen every pitch and remember every promise. Technology sales. He arrived with ideas. Restructuring ideas. The division should be organized differently. The client approach should be modernized. The relationship-based model was old-fashioned. Data and systems and scalable processes were the future. I listened to these ideas in meetings. I asked questions. I explained, professionally and specifically, why certain approaches that work in technology sales do not translate to government contracting. Government procurement has rules. Timelines. Relationships that cannot be replaced with automation. Brett did not appreciate the questions. Brett did not appreciate the explanations. Brett, I came to understand, did not appreciate anyone in the room who knew more about the actual business than he did. The climate shifted. Subtly at first. The way climates shift in organizations when someone new has power and begins using it. My budget was reduced. Twice. My team was reorganized. Without my input. My client meetings started requiring Brett's approval. My largest contract renewal was reassigned to a team Brett had built from outside the division. That team did not have the relationships. The renewal came back significantly reduced. I documented everything. I kept records. I presented data. I did all the things competent people do when they sense something is happening that data should be able to stop. Data does not stop political decisions. I learned that again. 7 months after Brett arrived. The termination letter appeared on my desk. Performance inconsistent with company culture. The meeting where they delivered it lasted 11 minutes. Victor. Brett. Sir. Victor said the company was evolving. Brett said the division needed a different energy. HR said the severance terms were on page 3. Nobody said thank you. Nobody said 7 years. Nobody said the 3 largest contracts in company history. Nobody said 40% portfolio growth. They said performance inconsistent with company culture. And they put a pen in front of me. I looked at the severance agreement. Standard. Nothing I would not sign. Nothing that prevented me from working in the industry. No non-compete covering government contracting relationships. I had checked. 6 weeks before this meeting. When I first understood what was coming. I had checked. Because I had not spent 7 years building relationships without understanding that relationships belong to the person who built them. Not to the company they built them for. I signed the severance. I shook 3 hands. I walked out of the building. I sat in my car. I did not cry. I was not sad. I was something colder than sad. More useful than sad. I was ready. I want to be honest about the evening after the termination. Because not everything that comes after a professional betrayal is strategy. Some of it is just sitting in your apartment at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, after 7 years, wondering what it means that the thing you were best at was the thing they punished you for. I had given Nexus everything. The relationships I had built were personal. The procurement officers I had coffee with. The agency contacts who called me when something changed in their requirements before the formal announcement. The client leads who asked for me specifically on renewal calls. I had made those relationships with myself, not with Nexus, and they had terminated me as though those relationships would stay in the building when I walked out. I sat in my apartment. I thought about Victor's face during the 11-minute meeting. He had not looked at me once. Not because he was ashamed. Because he had already decided I was no longer relevant. That is what performance inconsistent with company culture meant. You have become too big for the frame we built. So we are removing you from the frame. I sat with that for a long time. Then I opened my laptop. And I called my friend Carmen who ran a boutique consulting firm. And I said, I need to talk to you about something I have been thinking about for 6 weeks. She said, I'll open a bottle. Come over. 6 weeks before the termination letter I had started building. Not out of certainty that the termination was coming. Out of the professional awareness that it might. And the understanding that if it did, I wanted to be ready. The first thing I had done was call Gerald, my attorney. I asked him to review my employment contract. Specifically the non-compete and non-solicitation clauses. Gerald called me back the next day. The non-compete covers technology product sales, he said. Because that was the industry you were hired from. It does not specifically cover government contracting relationship development. And the non-solicitation? Covers employees of the company, he said. Not clients. Not agency contacts. Not procurement relationships. Those are mine, I said. As far as I can read this document, Gerald said. Yes. The second thing I had done was reach out to Carmen. Carmen ran a small government contracting consulting firm. 3 years old. Strong reputation. The infrastructure to absorb new contracts. Missing the relationship network to win them. I was the relationship network. He was the infrastructure. We had a conversation. A careful one. About what a partnership might look like. After certain things changed. The third thing I had done was make phone calls. Not solicitation. Just conversations. With people I had relationships with. Checking in. The way I always checked in. The way relationships are maintained. Several of those conversations included mentions of my upcoming situation. Several of those people responded in ways that told me what I needed to know. By the time Victor and Brett and HR sat me down for 11 minutes, I had been building for 6 weeks. The termination letter was not a disaster. It was a start date. 2 weeks after termination. I filed the paperwork for my partnership with Carmen. Cross Carmen Government Solutions. My name first. Then hers. Then I made the calls. Not the gentle check-in calls. The direct ones. To the procurement officers. To the agency contacts. To the client leads who had asked for me specifically on renewal calls. I told them where I was. I told them what I had built. I told them I would be in touch. The first call back came within 48 hours. The agency director I had worked with for 4 years. He said, Reina, I heard you had moved on from Nexus. I said, I have. He said, we have a contract renewal coming up in 6 weeks. Our preference would be to continue working with you directly. I would welcome that conversation, I said. The second call came 3 days later. A procurement officer at a different agency. Largest single contract in Nexus's portfolio. Annual value. Significant. He said, I heard some things about restructuring at Nexus. Are you still the relationship lead on our account? I said, I am no longer with Nexus. Silence. Then we need to talk, he said. About our upcoming renewal. I said, my new firm would be honored to discuss it. Within 60 days of my termination, Cross Carmen Government Solutions had submitted proposals on 4 contracts. 3 were contracts that Nexus had held. Contracts built on relationships I had built. Relationships that had followed me out the door. Because relationships belong to the person who built them. Not the company they built them for. Victor called me on a Friday afternoon. Personal cell. Not his assistant. Him. His voice was the version I had not heard before. Something underneath the polish. Reina, he said. I think we should talk. I said. I think that window has closed, Victor. He said. The Henderson contract is up for renewal. And the Morrison account. And the federal. I'm aware, I said. We submitted on all three. Silence. The specific silence of a man who has just understood that the infrastructure he terminated did not stay in the building. What do you want? He said. To build something, I said. Which is what I was always doing. Before you decided my performance was inconsistent with your culture. I heard him breathe. We made a mistake, he said. Yes, I said. You did. I hung up. Carmen was sitting across from me. She raised her coffee cup. I raised mine. 6 months after termination. Carmen Government Solutions had won 3 of the 4 contracts we had submitted on. Including the Henderson contract. Including the Morrison account. Including 1 federal contract that had been with Nexus for 9 years. 9 years. Built on a relationship. My relationship. That followed me home. Brett resigned from Nexus 4 months after my departure. The restructuring he had implemented was producing results. Just not the results he had intended. Victor sent one final message. An email. 2 sentences. I underestimated what you had built. I won't make that mistake again. I read it once. I did not reply. There was nothing useful to say. Everything useful had already been said. In proposals. In contract awards. In the phone calls of agency directors and procurement officers who had built relationships with a person. Not a company. Carmen Government Solutions is 2 years old. The portfolio has grown in ways that require a proper accounting team now. Not just Carmen and me in a shared spreadsheet. A real team. Several of whom I hired from Nexus. The people who built real things. The people whose performance was also inconsistent with the culture. We are consistent with each other. That turns out to be enough. I still have the termination letter. In a folder in my desk drawer. Not framed on the wall. Not posted anywhere. Just in a drawer. I look at it sometimes. Performance inconsistent with company culture. I think about what that meant. And I think about what it produced. A woman who took the relationships she had built. And built something with them that belonged entirely to her. No Victor. No Brett. No 11-minute meeting where nobody said 7 years. Just work. Real work. The kind that follows you out the door. Because it was always yours to begin with. They fired me for being too good. I took everything that made me good. And I left. And the contracts followed. Because that is what happens. When you confuse the person. With the position. The position stays. The person leaves. And takes the business with her.